All right, so boys and girls, we're going to read chapter 7. We've got uninvited brothers. So the word uninvited, we have a prefix, right? And then we have a root word. And then what is our suffix?
Ed.
Good, ed, very good. So what's the prefix un mean?
Not.
Not. And the suffix ed means what?
You did it before.
You already did it. So that means someone is already uninvited. They're already uninvited, and it looks like his brothers are uninvited. They're in his room, probably uninvited, right? So that's what we're going to find out in chapter 7 of Indian in the Cupboard. So let us begin. All right. Omri was not supposed to ride his bicycle on the road, but then he wasn't supposed to ride on the pavement either. Not fast at any rate. So he compromised. He rode it slowly on the pavement as far as the corner, and then he bumped down off the curb and went like the wind. Good. And we recognize that that's a type of figurative language, right?
Yeah.
What type of figurative language do you think that is?
Simile.
It's a simile. Very good. And it could be an idiom too, because it is like an extreme exaggeration. And why is it not a metaphor? Well, how do we know that's a simile? Go ahead, Tyler.
Because it has like.
Good. It uses like, and similes use like or as. The hardware shop was still open, so he bought the seed tray and the seeds and was just paying for them when he noticed something. The seed packet, under the word marrow, was written another word in brackets, squash. So one of the three sisters was Marrow, and on impulse he asked the shopkeeper, "Do you know what maize is?" "Maize, son? Well, that's sweet corn, isn't it? Well, have you some seeds of that?" Outside, standing by Omri's bike, was Patrick. Hi, I saw you going in. What did you get?" Omri showed him. "More presents for the Indian?" Patrick asked sarcastically. "Well, sort of, if what? Well, if I can keep him long enough until they grow." Patrick stared at him, and Omri stared back. "I've been to Yap's. I bought you something." "Yeah, what?" asked Omri hopefully. Patrick slowly took his hand out of his pocket, held it in front of him, and opened his fingers. In his palm lay a cowboy on a horse, with a pistol in one hand pointing upward, or what would have been upward if it had been lying on its side. If it hadn't been lying on its side. Omri looked at it silently, and then he shook his head. "I'm sorry, I don't want it." "Why not? Now you can play a proper game with the Indian." "Well, they fight. Isn't that the whole idea?" Well, there was a pause, and then Patrick leaned forward and asked very slowly and loudly, "How can they hurt each other? They are made of plastic." "Listen," said Omri, and then he stopped, and then he started again. "The Indian isn't plastic. He's real." Patrick heaved a deep, deep sigh and put the cowboy back in his pocket. He had been friends with Omri for years, well, ever since they started school, and they knew each other very well, just as Patrick knew when Omri was lying. He also knew when he wasn't. The only trouble was that this was a non-lie that he just couldn't believe. "I want to see him." Omri debated with himself. He somehow felt that if he didn't share his secret with Patrick, their friendship would be over. And he didn't want that. And besides, the thrill of showing his Indian to someone else was something he could not do without for much longer. "Okay, come on." Going home, they broke the law even more, riding on the road and with Patrick on the crossbar. They went on the back way by the alley in case anyone happened to be looking out of the window. You guys know what the crossbar is,
Yeah.
right? Like on the handlebars?
Yeah.
Omri said, "He wants a fire. I suppose we can't make one indoors." "Well, you could, like on a tin plate, like for indoor fireworks." Omri looked at him. "Well, let's collect some twigs." Patrick picked up a twig about a foot long, and Omri laughed. "That's no good. They've got to be tiny twigs, like this." And he picked up some slivers off the privet hedge. "Does he want a fire to cook on?" asked asked Patrick slowly. Yes. Well, then that's no use. A fire made of those would burn out in a couple of seconds. Omri hadn't thought of that. What you need, said Patrick, is a little ball of tar. That burns for ages. And you could put the twigs on top to look like a real campfire. Oh, that's a brilliant idea. I know where they've been tarring the road, too. Oh, come on, let's go. No. Why not? I don't believe in him yet. I want to see. All right, but first I have to give this stuff to my dad. There was a further delay when his father at first insisted on Omri filling the seed tray with compost and planting the seeds in it then and there. But when Omri gave him the corn seed as a present, he said, well, thanks. Oh, all right, I can see you're busting to get away. You can do the planting tomorrow before school. Omri and Patrick rushed upstairs. At the top, Omri stopped cold. His bedroom door, which he'd always shut automatically, was wide open. And just inside, crouching side by side with their backs to him, were his brothers. They were so absolutely still that Omri knew they were watching something. He couldn't bear it. They had come into his bedroom without his permission, and they had seen his Indian. Now they would tell everybody his secret, his precious secret, his alone to keep or share, was a secret no more. Something broke inside of him, and he heard himself scream. Everybody scream it.
Get out of my room!
Again. He says it twice.
Get out of my room!
Both boys spun around. Shut up or you'll frighten him, said ADL at once. Gilon came in to look for his rat, and he found it, and then he saw this absolutely fabulous little house you've made, and he called me in to look at it. Omri looked at the floor. The seed tray with the long house, now nearly finished, had been moved into the center of the room. Is that what they had been looking at? A quick glance all around showed no sign of the Indian or horse, but Gilon's tame white rat on his shoulder. I can't get over it, ADL went on. How on earth did you do it? Without using any glue or anything. It's all done with tiny threads and pegs. And look, Gilon, it's all made of real twigs and bark. It's absolutely terrific, he said with such awestruck admiration in his voice that Omri felt ashamed. I didn't, he began, but Patrick, who had been gaping at the longhouse in amazement, gave him a quick, heavy nudge that nearly knocked him over. Yes, said Omri. Well, would you mind leaving now and take that rat? You're not to let him in here. This is my room, you know. And this is my magnifying glass, you know, echoed Gilon. But he was obviously too overcome with admiration to be angry with Omri for pinching it. Remember what does pinching mean in this case?
Yeah.
What does it mean? Like, does it mean like actually pinching it, or does anyone remember? Stealing it. Very good, Bella, because he stole it from ADL's room. He was using it now to examine the fine details of the building. I knew you were good at making things, but this is uncanny. You must have fingers like a fairy to tie those witchy little knots. What's that? He asked suddenly, and they'd all heard it, a high, faint, whinny sound coming from under the bed. Omri was galvanized into action. At all costs, he must prevent them finding out now. He flung himself onto his knees and he pretended to grope under the bed. Oh, it's nothing. It's only that little clockwork dolphin I got at my Christmas stocking, he burbled. I just must have wound it up. I must have wound it up, and it suddenly started clicking. You know how they do it. It's quite creepy sometimes when they just suddenly stop clicking. And by this time he'd leaped up again and was almost pushing the two older boys out of the room. Why are you in such a hurry to get rid of us? Asked Gilon suspiciously. Just go! You know you have to get out of my room when I ask you. And he could hear the little horse whinnying again, and it just didn't sound a bit like a dolphin. That sounds just like a pony, said ADL. Oh, beard, it's a pony, a tiny witchy little pony under my bed, said Omri mockingly, and at last they went, not without glancing back suspiciously several times at Omri, slammed the door, bolted it, and leaned against it and closed his eyes. Is it a pony? Whispered Patrick, agog. Remember the word agog? It's up there on the board behind us. It's like almost like a complete shock. He just can't believe it. Omri nodded, and then he opened his eyes, lay down again, and peered under the bed. Give me that flashlight from the chest of drawers. Patrick gave it to him and lay beside him. They peered together as the beam probed the darkness. Crumbs, breathed Patrick reverently. It's true. The horse was standing, seemingly alone. When the light lit him and turned his head, Omri could see a pair of leggings behind him. It's all right, little bear. It's me. Slowly a crest of feathers and a pair of eyes appeared over the top of the horse's back. Who? Others? He asked. My brothers. It's okay. They didn't see you. Little bear, here coming. Take horse. Run. Hide. Good. Come on out and meet my friend Patrick. Little bear jumped astride the horse and rode proudly out, wearing his new cloak and headdress. You remember where he got the cloak and headdress?
Yeah. The cheek.
Mm-hmm.
The cheek.
Uh-huh. He gazed up imperiously at Patrick, who gazed back in wonder. Then he nodded to Patrick, who tried several times to say something, but his voice just came out as a squeak. Omri's friend, Little Bear's friend, said Little Bear magnanimously. Patrick swallowed. His eyes seemed in danger of popping right out of his head. Little Bear waited politely, and then when Patrick didn't speak, he rode over to the seed tray. The brothers had brought it out from behind the crate, and they'd been careful, but the ramp had gotten moved. Omri hurried to put it back, and Little Bear rode the horse up, dismounted, and tied it by its halter to the post and driven into the compost. And then he went calmly on with his work on the longhouse. Patrick licked his lips, swallowed twice more, and croaked out, He's real. He's a real live Indian. I told you. How did it happen? Don't ask me. Something to do with the cupboard. Or maybe it's the key. It's very old. You lock plastic people inside and they come alive. Patrick goggled at him. You mean it's not only him? You can do it with any toy? Well, only plastic ones. An incredulous grin spread over Patrick's face. Then what are we waiting for? Let's bring loads of things to life. Whole armies. And he sprang toward the biscuit tins. Omri grabbed him. No, wait, it's not so simple. Patrick, his hands already full of soldiers, was making way for the cupboard. Why not? Because they'd all be real, don't you see? They'd all be real. Real? What do you mean? Little Bear isn't a toy. He's a real man. He's really lived. Maybe he's still, well, I don't know, in the middle of his life somewhere in America in 17-something or other. He's from the past. Omri struggled to explain as Patrick looked blank. I don't get it. Listen, Little Bear has told me about his life. He's fought in wars. He's scalped people and grown stuff to eat like marrow and stuff. He's had a wife. She's died. He doesn't know how he got here, but he thinks it's magic, and he accepts magic, and he believes it. He thinks I'm some kind of spirit or something. What I mean, Omri persisted as Patrick's eyes strayed longingly to the cupboard, is that if you put all those men in there, when they come to life, they'd be real men with real lives of their own, from their own times, their own countries, talking in their own languages. You couldn't just set them up and make them do what you wanted them to do. They do what they wanted to do. Or they might get terrified and run away. Well, I tried with an old Indian, actually died of fright when he saw me. Look if you don't believe me. And Omri opened the cupboard, and there lay the body of the old chief, now made of plastic but still unmistakably dead, and not dead the way some plastic soldiers are made to look dead, but the way real people look, crumpled up and empty. Patrick picked it up, turning it in his hand, and then he put the soldier down right away. This isn't the one you bought at lunchtime. Yes, crumbs. You see? Well, where's his headdress? Little Bear took it. He says he's chief now. It's made him even more bossy and more difficult than before, said Omri, using a word his mother often used when he was insistent on having his own way. Patrick put the dead Indian down hurriedly and wiped his hands on the seat of his jeans. Maybe this isn't as fun as I thought. Omri considered this for a moment. No, it's not fun. They stared at Little Bear. He had finished the shell of his longhouse now, taking off the headdress, and he tucked under his arm, stooped and entered through the low doorway at one end, and after a moment he came out and looked up at Omri. Little Bear, hungry, you get deer, bear moose. No, I say get. Why you not get? The shops are shut. Besides, added Omri, thinking he sounded rather feeble, especially in front of Patrick, I am not sure I like the idea of having bears shambling about my room, or having them killed. I'll give you meat and a fire, and you can cook it, and that'll have to do. Little Bear looked baffled for a moment, and then he swiftly put on the headdress and drew himself to his full height of almost 3 inches, 3 1/4 with feathers. He folded his arms and he glared at Omri. Little Bear, chief now. Chief hunts, kills own meat, not take meat others kill. If not hunt who's skilled with bow. For today, you give meat. Tomorrow, go to shop. Get bear, plastic, make real. I hunt, not here, he added, looking up scornfully at the distance, out under the sky. Now, out under sky. Now fire. Patrick, who had been crouching, stood up. He too seemed to be under Little Bear's spell. I'll run and get the tar, he said. No, wait a minute. I've got another idea. He ran downstairs. Fortunately, the living room was empty. In the coal scuttle beside the open fireplace was a packet of firelighters. He broke a fairly large bit of one and wrapped it in scrap of newspaper. Then he went up to the kitchen. His mother was standing at the sink peeling apples. Omri hesitated and went to the refrigerator. Don't eat now. It's nearly supper time, Omri. Just a tiny bit. There was a lovely chunk of raw meat in a plate. Omri stuffed his fingers, wiped them hard on his sweater to get the stink of firelighter off them, took a big carving knife from the drawer, and with an anxious glance at his mother's back, began sawing a corner off the meat. Luckily it was steak and it cut easily. Even so, he nearly had the whole plate of the shelf on the floor before he'd cut a corner off. His mother swung around just as he closed the refrigerator door. A tiny bit of what? She asked. She often reacted late to what he said. Nothing, he said, hiding the raw meat in his hand. Mom, could I borrow a tin plate? I haven't got such a thing. Oh, yes, you have. The one you bought ADL to go camping. Oh, that's in his room somewhere. I haven't got it. A tiny bit of what? But Omri was already on his way upstairs. ADL was in his room. Well, he would be, doing his homework. What do you want? That plate, you know, your camping one. Oh, that, said ADL, going back to his French. Well, can I have it? Yeah, I suppose so. It's over there somewhere. Omri found it eventually in an old knapsack. Remember what a knapsack is, you guys? What is a knapsack? It's like the satchel that men carry their belongings in sometimes, like soldiers might carry it, or people camping might use it to carry it. Yeah, like a bag. It's an old knapsack. Covered with disgusting bits of baked beans, dry and hard as cement. He hurried across his room. Whenever he'd been away from me for even a few minutes, he felt his heart beating and panic as he opened the door for fear of what he might or might not find. The burden of constant worry was beginning to wear him out. But all was as he had left it this time. Patrick was crouching near the seed tray. Little Bear was directing him to take the tops off several of the jars of poster paint, while he himself fashioned something almost too small to see. It's a paintbrush. He cut off bits of his own hair, and he's tying it to a scrap of wood he found about the size of a big splinter. Pour a bit of paint onto the lid so he can reach in to dip, said Omri. Meanwhile, he was scraping bits of dry beans off the plate with his nails. He took a fragment of firelighter and the twigs out of his pocket and arranged them in the center of the plate. He watched the bit of meat on his bedside water glass. He had a wonderful idea for a spit to cook on. Now, it's the kind of spit like you get from your mouth? No, you understand it's the kind of spit that turns that you make to cook meat.
When you like cook, like
Yeah,
turn it.
yeah, very good. From a flat box on which his first erector set had once been neatly laid out, but which was now in chaos, he took a rod ready bent in a handle shape and pushed it through the meat. Then from small bits of the set, he quickly made a sort of a stand for it to rest on, with legs each side of the fire, so that the meat hung over the middle of it. "Let's light it now," said Patrick, who was getting very excited again. "Little Bear, come and see." Oops. "Little Bear, come and see your fire," said Omri. Little Bear looked up from his paints and then ran down the ramp across the carpet and vaulted onto the edge of the plate. Patrick struck the match and lit the fire lighter, which flared up at once, and bluish flame engulfing the twigs and the meat. The twigs of the gratifying crackle while they lasted, but the firelighter gave off very ungratifying stench, which made Little Bear wrinkle his nose. "Stink, spoil meat." "No, it won't. Turn the handle of the spit, Little Bear." Evidently, he wasn't much used to spits, but he soon got the hang of it. The chunk of steak turned and turned in the flame and soon lost its raw, red look and began to go away, and then brown. The juicy, good smell of roasting beef began to compete with the spirituous reek of the firelighter. "Mmm," said Little Bear appreciatively, turning till the sweat ran off his face. Meat! He had thrown his chief's cloak off and his chest shone red. Patrick couldn't take his eyes off of him. "Please," said Omri. "Please, Omri," he whispered, "could I have just one? Couldn't I just choose one? A soldier or anything I liked, just one, and make him come to life in your cupboard?" Chapter 8.
Cowboy.
Cowboy. So infer, what do you think Omri's going to say? Is he going to let him have something come to life?
Yeah.
Yeah, which one is he going to let him come to life?
Cowboy.
A cowboy. Good.